Welcome, everybody, to Faith 180, the podcast where mental health and faith collide. I am one of your hosts, Tom Hazelton, and joining me, as always, is the one, the only, the man himself, Jordan Hamilton.
Hello, bonjour. Any liquids, gels, or aerosols?
Why are you a flight attendant today?
I just flew back from Newfoundland, and
Well, that makes sense.
you hear that 50,000 times walking through the airport. And I do not have any liquids or gels, only aerosols.
So, did they
my
show you how to,
deodorant, aerosol.
did they show you how to buckle your seatbelt and like the illuminated path should an emergency happen?
I genuinely believe, okay, hear me out, and I have nothing against people that speak different languages, okay, but to watch the demonstration in French and in English, let's get rid of that. Let's take a vote when we're getting on the plane, like how many of you cannot comprehend the English version? And if it's a majority, we'll do both. But
why do we have to poll people? I mean, we're a bilingual country here.
I know, but fly in the U.S., it's a 3-minute instruction video and it's done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jordan's very passionate about this.
I will say, to the seatbelt joke, when they did it, I cracked the snide. Oh, that's how you do that, and everybody lost it. So,
I don't know what it is. Every time I go through airport security, I am like so stressed out. Every time I go through airport security, just in case I accidentally packed, a switchblade or something. Not that I ever would, but I'm like, I hope they don't find it, or my food that I'm sneaking there, like.
I had struggles early on when we started this podcast because the microphone I was using originally,
I forgot.
Folded down, looked like the packaging for a switchblade knife, and it got flagged 4 times in a row to the point where I went and bought a new one. That wasn't why I bought a new one, but it was annoying. They're like, "What is in the bottom of your bag?" I said, "I don't know. I think there's a microphone." Then they'd haul it out and be like, "Have a nice day." All this to say, I mean, the floor level lighting is great. They're pointing that out. But to be honest, if I'm going down in the Atlantic, I'm not looking for that lighting. I'm looking for somebody to hold on to. I'm not trying to find the nearest exit. I'm hoping it's going to be just above me.
So one thing I want to go back to here for a second, you were talking about the people asking about your microphone. When they dug it out of your bag, were they passing it around, like pretending to talk into it? Like, oh, I'm on the radio.
No. I just told them
bunch of lame-os.
I came from an interview with very important people.
Fair. And did they buy it?
No.
Wow. I don't know what to tell you.
This is certainly a rabbit hole we got. Write in and tell us if you agree or not. Should Canada?
Because we have the power to change that.
We will write the aviation people. And Tom, you don't know what you have the power to do until you try.
That is true.
Let me just put it that way, okay?
That is true.
But tell us if you agree. Should it be played in one language? In America, there's a very heavy Spanish population, and they're not listening to it in Spanish. And I love the French people. I think they're great, but the ones I've been next to on a plane, they talk to me in English.
So here we are. I don't know how we got on this topic of conversation, but as Jordan said, write into faith180crew@gmail.com and we will see what we can do
because
about
our
the
guest
Canadian
today
government.
Is an international traveler of sorts, and I just got my mind on travel. And then I was thinking, I need something to say when Tom comes over to me, so I just said, hello, bonjour.
There it is.
The rest is history. So
you kind of gave away. We do have a special guest here with us this evening, but before we get to them, Jordan, there's something you want to touch on for a few minutes.
Yes, something I'm really, really passionate about. I've been collecting rocks for a long time, and I don't collect rocks anymore. I have real friends. His name is Tom.
That's me.
Yeah. And we only hang out when we record this.
When we record.
Best friend to have.
Because if we talked all the time, we would have nothing to talk about when we get on here, you know?
Concert. Faith 180 presents a concert. Yes.
Who's performing at this concert?
Set list for Sunday.
Who's set list for Sunday?
As good or better than Switchfoot. Yeah, I hear. We just got in touch with them, and no, actually, they got in touch with us. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. No, it's a band that I might be in. Nonetheless, we're looking forward to an event night coming up in July or August. Keep your ears peeled for that. And I think we just had a great idea to try and do this in collaboration with our guests this evening. So we originally didn't really have plans. We knew we wanted it to be some sort of charity event. And I think this might just actually have just landed on our lap very nicely. So you'll find out very soon who that guest is. If you're a longtime listener, you've probably met or seen this person in person. I just wanted to say that we're still planning on doing that. It should be a fun night. A lot of cover songs of early 2000s Christian stuff. Could be fun. Yeah, we thought about naming ourselves Foot Switch, but
Too close to copyright infringement.
very too close. Yeah.
And
our songs are already good enough that people think it's Switchfoot, so we don't need to dabble in the in that world.
I'm just excited to organize another event. I know the last one we did in the fall, I had a blast, despite it was stressful. And I think organizing the events is just something fun to do. Get people out, give them something to do.
Yep. We like this organization. We've indirectly helped with a few different events. And I learned I could sell cookies for $40, $50 a piece.
Slices of cake for $100.
I then quit my job, and this actually, Tom, before, just a side note, and we'll get to our guest really quickly because I know everybody's waiting. When I was in Newfoundland, there was a place called Craig's Cookies. Shout out to Craig's Cookies. I texted my mother the next day, and I was like, why aren't you making cookies, Mom? Like, I looked at my boss and I said, these, don't tell her, but these are as good as Mom's cookies. So you go in, and then they've got like 25 different flavors of cookies that you can choose from, like Snickers, strawberries and cream, peanut butter. I had a shortbread cookie that was baked inside of a chocolate chip cookie, and $3.25 a cookie. I'm thinking, this is an empire. Brilliant idea. You wouldn't think, and then you could buy a glass of milk for like $3. But it's one of those. It's like, remember the old frozen yogurt places where you'd walk in and you'd pour your own frozen yogurt?
Yep.
It was an experience.
More than yogurt in the Yarmouth Mall.
I think there's money in cookies, so we might have to bake some for the night of our event and just give them away as a teaser for Tom's Cookies that will be opening in September.
All right, done. So segueing away from Jordan's Cookie Corner here, we're going to get into our guest. You like that?
Now I'm hungry.
You like the Jordan's Cookie Corner?
Jordan's Cookie Corner, yeah. We should call it Jordan's Wreck of the Week. I recommend Craig's Cookies, Newfoundland, if you're listening.
So with that, we do have a guest here this evening, and we are very excited to have her here with us this evening. I pulled up her.
Read it.
I'm not going to read the whole bio. I pulled up her whole bio, and she's like, please don't. So anyway, I will just give a quick introduction here. So this individual holds a bachelor's degree from Kingswood University and a master's in organizational leadership from Indiana Wesleyan University. She is an ordained minister in the Wesleyan Church, and since 2018, she has been the CEO of World Hope International Canada. We are joined this evening with Tanya Nace. That's Nace. It's like face with an N. Everybody, welcome Tanya.
Yay!
Hello, good to be here.
Hey Tanya, how you doing?
Thanks for that you did the face with an N. That was so good. No one ever put that on the air. That's quite nice.
It has now been.
It's official.
Immortalized.
Yeah.
On Faith 180.
I love it.
So thanks for taking the time to join us this evening. We greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, you're a busy person, and it's great that you're giving us this time. So thank you.
Yeah, we approached you back, I believe it was February, and we're finally able to do it tonight, and we are pumped.
I'm excited. I'm excited to hang out with you guys and chat about whatever we need to chat about.
So speaking of hanging out with us in February, Yarmouth Wesleyan Church had done an event with World Hope International. We did the annual trivia night back in February. Jordan was on slides that night. I was asked to host, and I think we had a phenomenal night that night. We had a great turnout. Oh, it was amazing.
Yeah. So many people were there. Kids were running around laughing, having a good time. Yarmouthonians. I'm not sure. How do you say it? People from Yarmouth? Yarmouthians,
I say.
Yarmouthians?
Yarmouthians.
Like giving so many incredible generous donations for like cookies and cakes, hence what we just talked about. Yeah. It was so cool. It was so cool. I love it whenever people get together, not only have fun, challenge each other, but also do it for a really important cause. And that's what happened that night. It was so cool. You're
usually down for those, aren't you?
I love that stuff.
Yeah, no, but I mean, like, you are usually physically in Yarmouth whenever Yarmouth does the trivia nights. You're down for them, but you are physically down.
That was my first trivia night I ever attended, but I've been there for other like events or whatever, right? So I swung by.
Yeah, because I remember you preaching and talking about World Hope once or twice before. Yeah, right on.
Yeah, it was really fun.
Cool.
I had a blast. I only messed one slide up. I always like to jump in there when I can lend a hand. It's my thing has been, and this goes out to anybody else who's looking for a community, stop into your church and ask them which wall they want painted. Straight up. If you want a place to just kind of be immersed in all things good, I spent a lot of time at my church. I've painted a few walls to the point where my wife's called me and asked if I'm just going to live at the church or not. But I have learned that soaking in that community has been super beneficial, not only for my mental health, but just for my day-to-day. I trust everybody there. You know, nobody's there pointing fingers. We're all just living in a community, and it's been great. So, yeah, that trivia night was super awesome. And then Tom and I obviously got to Woods Harbor, was it?
Yep, it was Woods Harbor.
That was another World Hope event that I thought was very successful. Tom, thoughts?
Oh, yeah.
Did you hear about it, Tanya? Did you hear good news?
I heard good stuff about it because the Yarmouth Wesleyan event was focused on clean water, right?
Yep.
Bringing more clean water to West Africa. And I actually just got back from there, so maybe we can talk a little bit about that. I got to see some of the wells that Yarmouth
Here's hoping.
And then Woods Harbor put a well in last year, and then it's now raising money for the recovery center where trafficked women and children go after they've been kind of rescued and kind of work through that healing journey with them. And I just think it's so cool that in the midst of things that are tough in our own communities and our own families, which it is, right? Tough stuff happens. For us to think bigger picture and not just about our own little world, but also the whole world, and think about other things and where the needs are at other places and care about both of those things. Not one or the other. In no way is that okay, but we need to be doing both and it was just really cool to hear how God's working and people are responding to that and saying, well, let's do something. We can help people who live on less than $1 a day. What can we do, right? Like, how can we help some of the poorest places in the world? Our community needs help, but so do other communities, and partner together. It's just really powerful.
I got the shivers.
Did R.L. Stein just walk in? Because I got goosebumps.
It's fascinating because one of Tom and I's goals for season 2, and this is kind of stuff that we don't really talk about much, but it's kind of just internal stuff. One of our goals was to, hopefully increase our outreach, be able to, have this message about God and mental health reach a global scale at some point would be phenomenal. So to say that we had an idea of what season 2 was going to look like, but God has certainly swooped in and completely changed that plan for us. Indirectly, this became a very apparent. Season 2 was more about next steps. It's like, okay, I hear you guys. I get it. A relationship with Jesus, community. How do I do that? And the guests we've had on this season, not only are they not really part of our circles to begin with, they're people we've never met, and it's phenomenal. It's been great. So to say we're excited about tonight is an understatement. We're looking forward to, hearing about certain projects that World Hope has on the go. We want to jump in and learn more about you first and kind of just have a chat. And I loved how you used the term hangout, because I think this podcast has become more about hanging out and just chatting. So I know Tom's got some questions about the early days. Tom, you want to dive in there?
Yeah. So as Jordan said, we kind of want to get to know you a little bit as well. what was your, what was your childhood like? And more specifically, what was your relationship with Jesus like growing up? And was there one?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so I was born and raised in Prince Edward Island, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and my dad worked. And we actually grew up in pretty significant poverty. There was no extra money. I didn't know anything about it because they didn't share that with us as kids. But I remember having Mr. Noodle night or Mr. Noodle day, and we couldn't wait for Mr. Noodle day because like my mom made it to be such an amazing day, and we couldn't wait for that special day to have Mr. Noodles. The only time we ever had it. And like looking back, I wonder, is that when the food ran out, right? Like, was that whenever we were having Mr. Noodles, there was not any food left in the house, and that was our last ditch effort. And just kind of growing up in that environment, and now looking back, seeing how my parents lived on faith, and they lived, they're so good, and they're so connected in the community and helping others out. And I just watched them do that my whole life. And both of them are deep followers of Jesus. But it was really neat looking back, and as an adult now, looking back and being like, what did I learn from watching that and reflecting on that now as an adult? It's now changed how I live as an adult. And it's stuff like that you don't realize, right, when you're a child. And not everyone has that experience. Not everyone has a positive childhood. I understand that. That also impacts you when you're an adult, right? It's just such a significant impact, however you're raised. My mom, I call her my theology teacher. Like she had us memorizing the Beatitudes, like the Lord's Prayer. We learned about all the passages. We come from a Wesleyan holiness tradition, and I learned everything. John Wesley, Charles Wesley, like all the history of all the things. And I just thought it was normal. I'm like, isn't this just normal stuff that normal families talk about? And then I get to Bible college, and I'm like, oh, these tests are so easy. They're like super simple. I know all these answers.
Did your mom make you do sword drills?
We did sword drills growing up. Yes, we did those at church all the time. We just had everything memorized. And it wasn't that it was just memorized head knowledge, but it was also like really hard. Like my mom and my dad lived it out, and it was hard. So we got to watch it in action every single day. And my mom led me to the Lord. I accepted Jesus as my best friend. That's what I tell my boys, as my best friend when I was like 6 years old, and have really just been following the Lord ever since that time. And not that it's been easy the entire time, but it's been really cool watching those foundational seeds that were planted in my life now grow. And again, you don't realize that till later. Like you don't, right? And I'm sure there's more plants to be grown that I don't know about. But my parents just really, really intentionally kind of sowed the word of the Lord into our lives. And I remember going to sleep at night and hearing them pray for us every night. I think they still do it, and you're like, whoa, you don't realize how powerful that is till later, right? And I just thought that was normal. So yeah, it's a really cool childhood growing up. Again, tough times up until I was probably in junior high, but we didn't really think about it. It wasn't really something that was central to our life. But now looking back, I realized how intense it probably was.
This is very interesting. Because just 6 hours ago, I was at the church and I had a meeting, more of a counseling session with Pastor Dave. And I'll say it. My wife and I are working through the Alpha Marriage course directly with Pastor Dave, which has been a blessing. They put it on as a church, but we were kind of the pilot program that he kind of just formulated. And all that to say is we went into that conversation. The chapter we were talking on was basically about our past and our parents and our upbringing and love you, mom and dad. One of the things that came up was like your foundations. And that's something you just said right there that I find super fascinating, because we talked about that with Dave today. Basically, what was your foundations like for this? And the thing you brought up that just really made me smile was you said your parents lived on faith. And I think one of the things that I'm learning to do more recently, and again, I never seen the value of half of this stuff we talked about today until we talked about it today, because I never think about it. You don't think, what was the foundation of your upbringing in terms of like Christ-centric. I grew up in a family where, my dad was working 5 days a week. My mom was stay at home. Mind you, she was raising 4 kids. So It wasn't like she wasn't working, and we were busy, and to the point of like, we didn't know we were poor type of thing. They did that for us too, for our family. I think Tom probably grew up in a similar situation, and the community aspect you brought up sparked my interest as well. But the thing that really caught me was that they lived on faith. And one of the things we talked about with Dave today was like, one of the things that every marriage I think deals with is finances and financial struggles. There's financial winnings. It's up and down in the financial department. And one of the things that I said to Dave today was like, I'm just realizing that like I've been living on faith the past 2 months. I really think that the Lord has his hand in this season. And typically in the past, and I know this is a very far sidebar from where we were, but typically in the past, when I would come up to financial hardship, I was very quick to blame God. And now I'm doing the opposite. I'm thanking him for what grace he is dropping, what insights he's giving me, and things have happened in the last few weeks that give me such a bright hope in terms of that. And all that to say is it's important to stay strong. And I think this is something that the church has been preaching for the last few weeks as well. When things are tough, how are you standing in the face of adversity as a Christian? And lived on faith is just, it's so tremendous to hear that, because it's not, the sermon we heard Sunday was in Revelations. It was about Thyatira, and basically how, okay, you guys are doing your thing on Sunday, that's great, but you're doing your own thing the rest of the week. I've just been learning that I can't do that. So yeah, super big sidebar. I apologize for that, but I just couldn't believe when you said lived on faith in the conversation I had with Dave today. And me and Tom don't believe in coincidences anymore. So
Right.
I had to bring it up. Tom, any questions for start there? Sorry, I sidebarred.
No, the sidebars are fine. But yeah, I mean, you hit it on the head. We grew up in a household of faith, but we didn't grow up in a household of forced on you faith, I guess is the best way to describe it. Like, my parents are faithful people, always have been, but they never were the ones who were like, you go to bed and you pray. It was, they gave us enough leniency to kind of explore it on our own. And being a kid and being a teenager, we never really did that, which is kind of what led to me leaving faith for a long time. And just going back, like, yeah, hearing stories of you guys, in financial, like, we were blessed growing up. I mean, we weren't rich by any means, but we were well off enough that, my parents would always be like, hey, your friend so-and-so, you should invite them over for supper. And it's like, I know now it's because my parents realized, hey, they probably needed a meal or whatnot. So we were blessed in that way that we were able to do that. And yeah, we were very fortunate. I knew it then, but the older I get and the more stories I hear, me and my brother, we really had an amazing childhood, and, we have amazing parents too. And it's just one of those situations, even now, being back in faith, that I'm able to have these conversations with my parents. And whereas before, when I would have the conversations with my parents, having my questions, having whatever, they would get defensive, they would get angry. Why are you asking this? But now they realize, when I was asking those questions, even when I wasn't walking a faithful life, I wasn't doing it to be confrontational. I literally just had questions that I wanted answers to. And now we're able to have those conversations. So that's my sidebar.
I have one more sidebar, and it's the point you brought up about, I think you said you heard your mother perhaps praying every night. And this is a sidebar to something that hasn't been released yet, but we had a conversation with Tom's wife and my sister a few weeks ago. It's currently unreleased because it's super deep. We scratched the surface on, when me and Tom both realized we needed help beyond our own control. And it's deep. One of the things my sister said on it that shifted and when it comes out, we'll forward it to you so you can hear this bit too. But in real time, my sister was talking about my grandmother, and my grandmother was a great woman of God. Her husband got sick in his 50s, and she had to care for him for several years. He was in a bed. She gave birth to her daughter. She was born with Prader-Willi syndrome, which is an extremely rare condition. And she wasn't dealt the best hand, is what I'm getting at. And my sister made a point in that episode that just, I said, I just realized my grandmother's an angel. But she would wake up at 3 a.m. and kneel by her bed and pray till 4, 5, 6, 7. And when she said that, I remembered it. I remember it now. You could hear her through the grates praying for families, people. And the point my sister made is like, that's somebody who has experienced God. There is, and I got chills in that moment. I was like, you know what? My grandmother did. Like, I didn't take advantage of that. And in that moment, I was quite upset about it. But to realize, like, I got an angel looking out for me, and she started looking out for me long before I even knew she was looking out for me. And that shook me. It was like, you know what? That is a woman of faith, and that is somebody who's experienced the presence of Jesus, because her dedication just to speaking with the Father was unmatched. And at every turn, she had every right to say, that's enough. She cared for her daughter for 30 years. She cared for her husband for 20. And now she's caring for all of us up there. So when you said, that you could hear your parents praying about it, that's just super inspirational for me. So from that point, how do you get to where you are now from, I think you're at 10 when we stopped chatting. So obviously you had some teenage years. Tom's got something to say. I can tell. Go for it, Tom.
At what moment in your life did you realize you were essentially going to, give your life for the Lord? I mean, you're an ordained minister. You have a bachelor's degree in Kingswood. Like, what is that something that you always had in the back of your mind, or is that just something that you came to in your teenage years? Like, how did that come about?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, I'll tell you a little bit of my story on that kind of direction in my life, but I just want to caveat it with, I think we all have these experiences if we're following Jesus, where he says, like, not that this, or like, not that door, this door, or I've gifted you in this way for this time, for this season. So I just want to caveat that, because I know that in the church it's been maybe lifted up too much about like people going into ministry, but then all the other incredible gifts people have that are not vocational ministry, but we do ministry in our workplaces every single day. And like, I heard someone say, like, all of us preach in our workplaces more than a pastor ever would preach, right? Every day our lives are the living testament of Jesus Christ in our lives. And so I just want to caveat that when I share my story, it's kind of a crazy, extreme kind of ministry calling story. But I do know that we all, as we follow Jesus, have some type of story where God has said, this is what I've created you for this season. And that just looks different in every season, right? We never quite know what that is until we get to heaven, because really it's to build his kingdom and to worship him and to love him. So I just want to throw that out there, because I never want this to be some like special story.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No,
makes perfect sense.
I completely get it. And to contrast that completely, you've got me and Tom. It is the best contrast to what I think you're about, to say about your story. You don't need papers to do the Lord's work, to do kingdom work. That's not to take away from anyone with them. But I think it's important to realize that the church is the people. It's not the building. Something I heard growing up, I never understood until later. You can come from any walk of life. I mean, we talked to Cal Maskery, and we're going to talk to Nathan next week. We were supposed to talk to him last week, but next week. When you hear a story like Cal's, Cal had no plans in his early years of working halfway houses and discipling and ministering for Jesus, and here he is. So anybody listening to this, if you have some sort of gift and maybe you just don't know what it is, talk to your pastors. Mm-hmm. They will help you. Pastors are waiting for people to show up and say, what is my role? And I think traditionally we just assume that we don't have a role. It's the pastor's job. And one thing I've learned in the past few years is pastors are, and we talked about this with Dave when we interviewed him, they're swamped. They're free counsel for a lot of people in the community, not just members of the church. We were talking to Dave today. My wife asked him, because I forget how it came up, but she said, how many funerals have you done? And Dave said the number of funerals he's done. And it's like, that's crazy. It's crazy. You are in the community. So that's to say we need more disciples. We need more people willing to step up in the church and say, you know what, let me carry some of the load over in this area. And it can be as small as pouring coffee on a Sunday morning. So tell us the story.
Yeah, no, for sure. I always want to say that because I don't want to think that I'm any specialer than anyone else following Jesus, that he just kind of calls different people for different things. So my mom's prayers, as I mentioned, my mom and dad's prayers, my mom said she prayed like a bathtub of tears throughout my childhood, which made me feel terrible when I got older, because she said I was so people-oriented and so energetic, which I've calmed down by like a good 70% since I was a teenager, if it makes you feel any better. So I'm pretty hyper anyways now. That she said you'll either be like, she didn't tell me this, but in her mind, she's like, she's either going to be a gang leader, or she's going to like help Jesus, like one or the other. Cause it's like, and mom wasn't sure which direction it was going to go. So I did accept the Lord when I was 6 years old. But when I was 13, I went on my first missions trip to Montreal. And I mean, this is an island girl. I had traveled a little bit, not much, but went to Montreal and just like, we're just serving people. You just kind of there. We did like stuff in the parks. We did stuff in the local church. We did some evangelism, just mixture of things that teen groups do when they go on mission trips. And we were on top of Montreal where the cross is that's lit up at night, doing communion. And I remember being like pouring rain. It was the only time that I kind of remember God speaking to me with a voice, like that I kind of felt like, I don't even know if it was actually audible, but it was at least in my mind, where he said, I don't want you to do all the plans you have. But that plan, I didn't know what those plans were. I was only 13 years old, but he's like, I don't want you doing those plans. I want you to serve me and serve the church. And like, will you do that? And it was like such a powerful moment. And for my personality, I need powerful moments like that with the Lord, because he kind of slaps me sometimes in the face. Come on, man, let's get going. Sometimes that can be a little dense. And ever since that moment, I came back and I was like, yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah, I'm guilty of that.
On fire after that. And I was like the worst evangelist in high school, like telling everyone about Jesus and setting up prayer groups and like see you at the pole prayer meetings. Like I was a crazy person.
You were a weird
kid. And I'm
sure
I was the weird one.
I was just about to say,
I mean that so nicely.
I was just about to say you were that kid.
I ran the other way.
Me. Most people would have hated me. And I'm sure people that went to high school probably don't ever want to speak to me again, because I was just so passionate to share the transformation that I'd experienced myself with them. Mm-hmm. And I was at the youth rallies, and I was inviting my friends to church and all these things. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just on fire, right? And I didn't know what that meant. So I knew some people who went to Bible college, and then throughout the next couple of years, the Lord really started placing scriptures on my heart about the world and about his kingdom being grown and about every nation being a part of heaven and about every tongue having to hear about Jesus. And that just kind of was in my personal devotional time. I just started feeling like, I think God wants me to be a part of this, maybe. I don't really know what that means. Like maybe I'm supposed to be a missionary. I don't know. Like, what are you supposed to say, right? And there was this pastor who I don't think actually realized the impact that he had on my life. He was from a different church. He was a youth pastor. I don't even know if you know him. His name is Gary Cowper. He was in the Nazarene church. And he was so encouraging to me about this calling that I was kind of sensing. And he was one of the only people kind of in a vocational Christian setting, kind of from that kind of position, who would just kind of let me share and encourage that. He like wrote my recommendation letter to Kingswood. He wrote so many references for me to go on mission trips. Like the poor man. I wasn't even in a youth group, but I just felt like here's a pastor who, like you said about Dave, here's a pastor who I've shared my heart with. God is telling me something. I don't know what that is. And he probably didn't even say anything, but he just was so encouraging that like, keep walking, right? Keep moving in this direction. And that's how I ended up at Kingswood, thinking I was going to be a missionary, which I never became one, right? So I'm like, I don't know. So it's just so interesting as we follow the Lord. It seems like there's these times where there are like stake in the ground moments where you're like, I look back and I remember these specific times. And I feel like he gives us these stake in the ground moments. Some of them are positive, some of them are negative. But there's something we remember as him like twisting us or turning us in the direction that he would have us go. And you look back and that's how we remember God was there, right? God was present. He's a part of this. It's not about me. It's about him. And like the Israelites did that, they piled stones up everywhere, right? That pile of stones, you remember from 200 years ago, that's whatever so-and-so heard from the Lord, and he said, do this. And this pile of stones was from something else. And it's like the stake in the ground type moments that I've had throughout my life, not sure where it was going to lead, but just trying to be faithful in those small moments.
That's incredible.
This is so much fun because we don't hear stories like this all the time.
Nope.
This is such an interesting angle. I feel like we've gone full circle, Tom.
100%. I was thinking the same thing.
I wrote down like this is such an exciting story because this is atypical for this podcast, first of all, but I also think it makes a very interesting point. You still seem to second guess, even though it appeared clear to you, God's calling. You still second guess. I found that very interesting because even people who seem to have clarity still question God's authority in a sense. I certainly challenge it all the time, and I know one of those stake in the ground moments I think was starting this podcast. We didn't think anybody was going to listen to this, and again, comes back to living by faith. And even though you still had questions about, you were quite certain this is what was going to happen, you still had questions about it. And I think that's relevant to people. I hear from God. I think Tom hears from God.
Yep. I heard from him recently that I still don't know what he meant. Like, but I know, but I'm hoping it's going to be one of those moments that when I get to where he's leading me currently, I'll be like, oh, okay, gotcha. Like,
exactly.
Be a bit more clear next time.
One of the things we're learning we're taking a course, Tanya, through the church. They're programs from Kingswood, but it's more so put on by the church. So we don't graduate with anything, but we're learning a lot about local church leadership and
spiritual disciplines and other fun stuff.
Learn.
And
what's that?
Is it Kingswood Learn? Kingswood Learn platform? Or no?
No. Well, see, they're taking that basically and
modifying.
Yeah, they're modifying it. Yeah, so it's a lot of the same kind of like we hear from people in the church that went through the courses to get degrees, and we're taking those courses just on an unofficial level. And one of the things that I think is important that we learned this last semester with Pastor Jason was having spiritual mentors and people that can help you discern what you feel the Lord is speaking to you, because I'm guilty of it. There's times I've walked into a pastor's office and said, you're going to think I'm crazy, and they don't. They really don't. And there's a perception, I think, this is so interesting. I heard Need to Breathe song the other day while I was driving to church, and it's called Child Again. And one of the lines is, I want to know it's safe to be a child again. And in that moment, I realized, how cool would it be to sit through a Sunday service where you didn't care about the opinions of anybody else around you and you just reverted to your childhood? And I was thinking back to the worship night we had this weekend, how many kids I saw charge the stage while no adults, would rigidly stand in their spots. And my heart just went to myself too, is like, take those barriers down. Stop caring what the lady next to you, the man next to you, because you know what? They're thinking the exact same thing. And when the church decides to move its feet and to kneel down, when that song came on, I was like, you know what? I wish everyone in that congregation would feel safe to be a child again and just eliminate any predisposed notions of God. Come to the Father. Like, He's waiting for us, right? And that's the interesting point. And as much as we want to run away, He doesn't go away.
It's just funny how, our earthly opinions of others kind of limits us from fully diving in. You know what I mean? Like you said, getting rid of what you're worrying the person sitting next to you is thinking. Like if you get rid of that, just imagine how open your heart could be, right?
Yeah.
And it's wild.
Yeah.
And I, you said it, you guys, like you walk into a room and say, you guys are going to think I'm crazy, and they don't. I haven't shared this story with very many people, but I swear, like a month ago, I clear as day heard the voice of God. He literally said 3 words to me that I don't know what they mean, but I'm listening to it. And the more I'm doing what he said, I'm just quickly segue here, driving into work one day, kind of, pondering what he has in store for me. I'm thinking about my professional life. I'm thinking about, how my professional life is kind of hindering my kingdom advancement life, going along, things like that. Like, what do I do in that regard? Thinking just everything. What do I do? And clear as day, as if someone was sitting next to me in the car, I heard the words "wait it out." And I'm like, well, what does that mean? But the more I'm waiting it out,
That's weird.
The more people are approaching me and telling me things. Like, I had one of the pastors come up to me on Saturday. That's the season
I'm in, Tom.
Right.
I just said this to Dave. I'm in a wait it out, and I think God is challenging me and maybe you, because the waiting is the part where I would always jump off the boat.
So literally, like, clear as day, wait it out. And I only heard it once because I was like, what was that? What'd you say? And nothing. But I was talking to one of the pastors after the worship night on the Saturday. I walked up to him and I was just like, hey, like, you've been ministering to people all night. I'm just like, how are you? Like, how are you? Like, are you okay? Where are you spiritually? Where are you? And he goes, what's funny? He goes, I saw you on the other side of the room and I was going to walk over to you, but you came over to me and now you're pastoring a pastor. And as I was looking at you, he goes, I just had that feeling that God was telling me that soon I'm going to ask Tom to do one of the not so fun things with ministry. And I hope he's ready for it. And I'm like, wow. I'm like, that's wild that you say that. And like, it gave me a tingle, but I don't know what the waited out means. I don't know what's in store for me, but I'm ready to listen.
I'm content, and I never used to be.
I'm not content because I want more, and I think that's kind of what's frustrating me right now.
I think you're gonna be content.
I know, and that's what he wants me to do.
God might want you to be content, Tom.
I think he might want me to wait it out.
Tanya, what do you think?
I don't know. It depends. I mean, I always say that God, his timing is perfect. We know that by looking at scripture, but his timing is never early, at least from my experience. When you look at scripture, it's never early, but it's always right on time. So it's really good that he gets our attention and that he preps us to like be ready to move, because any movement that you see in scripture with the Holy Spirit directing or guiding or transforming hearts, it all has to do with action. Like, there's always a movement that takes place, right? It never takes place when someone's just sitting, waiting, but that person may have been waiting for a long time. But whenever the actual thing happens that God's been preparing over time, there's always a point of action that has to take place. And so it's impossible to be a believer, a follower of Jesus, and follow Jesus without any action. It's impossible, but you also have to wait for the right timing and for the right doors to open. So it sounds like that's what's going on. God's preparing you for some action, and at the moment you're going to know, but right now you're just kind of getting prepped for it.
It's kind of funny you say that about how, the Bible is just about the action, because, I mean, how exciting would it be if it was just chapters of, and he was just hanging out with his friends. He made bread this day, like,
Yeah, like there are seasons of waiting. Like, I know that, right? And there's times of the desert. There's desert seasons for people, and there's times of pain. There's times of loss. There's times of grief. There are seasons of that for sure. But anytime the Lord starts to make a move into a situation for transformation to take place, there's always action that happens there. And it's always directed and guided by him and by his Holy Spirit, right? So to say that you're walking in the Spirit and sometimes you are waiting, and that's okay, but you better be ready to act when he tells you to act, because otherwise you're going to miss it, and it's going to move on without you.
Yeah. And you got to be ready to jump on that boat,
Yeah.
I felt that about, this podcast and writing music again was, I honestly, when I felt that call, I had nothing. I was like, okay, I can do it. And I wrote down 2 words in a note document. And then a few weeks later, I was praying about it and laying in bed that night, wrote the whole rest of the song. And was like,
awesome.
Where did this come from? And
that's awesome.
That to me was like affirmation, like, okay, if you're willing to do it, And that's all I did. I wrote down 2 words, just the action of saying, okay, Lord, send me. And I felt that about this podcast as well. No idea why we're still here, but for some reason we are. And I think it's phenomenal. If you've experienced Jesus, don't think you're crazy. I do recommend discernment and just have spiritual mentors to speak into that. People who have walked the road, experienced it, because you can sometimes mistake what you perceive to be the Lord speaking, and then you can end up down a darker road than the one you're on. But do recommend that. So you're in Montreal. You have that experience. Where does Tanya go from there?
Yeah. After you graduate, you become ordained. Like, what happens after that?
Yeah. So
she went back to high school and started another Bible study,
another inter-school Christian foundation.
I probably was not invited back to my high school.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Honest, and my husband during Kingswood time, and he also was open to being a missionary. Didn't know what that looked like, and we just thought, okay, we're gonna get married and be a missionary. That's our life. Like, we don't want any earthly belongings. We just want to go where no one's heard about Jesus, and that's what we're gonna do with our life. Like, that was our only plan. We literally had no other plan. And over a season of time, the Lord started to reveal through spiritual mentors, actually, that maybe he wants you to be a part of the global kingdom and what he's doing globally. But maybe it doesn't actually include being a missionary in the traditional sense. And I ended up being very good at recruitment. And I did that for Kingswood for a little short season. And then I got hired on by the Wesley Church headquarters to recruit missionaries. And I didn't know that was a job, but it was a job. And I was like, really good at it. And I loved it. And I was so excited. And during that season, I asked the Lord, I said, okay, if you're not going to send me, I was mad. I'm like, if you're going to leave me in a place where there's churches everywhere and Christians, like, I want to go where there's no one who knows the Lord, right? Like, I want to go share Jesus with people. But if you're going to put me in a place like this, you have got to remove that deep passion that I have for the world, so that when I travel to other countries, I'm not feeling like everywhere I go, I want to be here. I have to be here. I want to be here. Because I won't be able to handle that. Like, I'll be a complete disaster. And he did that. And to this day, I've never been a traditional missionary. But to this day, I've connected people to the world in whatever way God asks me to do that. And I've traveled around the world, but I've always felt the deep passion for where I've gone, a deep connection. I can see what God's doing there. It's very transformative for me. But I've never felt that, like, I can't leave, I need to live here kind of feeling, because I told him, I said, I won't be able to do that if you're gonna ask me to do this. So my whole career, I mean, it's been about 20 years now, has been connecting people with the world to be missionaries, helping other people learn to connect people to the world to be missionaries, connecting churches to the nations with what God's doing in projects and how he's just working in such incredible ways in development work and evangelism. And that's where I am. Like, literally, my job is to connect people with what God's doing around the world. That's my deepest passion. And it's been the most random journey, one I never ever would have expected would ever happen. And it was just unexpected in every way, but deeply fulfilling as well.
I love how you elaborated on, asking God to remove that aspect, because I was thinking, you got the job hiring missionaries, but you didn't hire yourself.
Right? I know. I couldn't make it in the process. I failed the process, so I'd have to help other people do it. Yeah, I just knew, like, if I didn't have that deep desire removed, I would be a complete disaster.
Right.
Like, I just feel like breaking down every time I heard about, like, the need for the gospel or people who are in need. Like, I just want to be there, like, hands on the ground helping. But it's been really cool because we know God put people in different places for different seasons, for different things. And now that I look back on this first season and of my, career in vocational leadership, it's like the whole globe has been impacted, because I can think of, like, every country that all the people I've connected people with, right? And all the different locations where people's hearts have been opened or their worldview has been widened because they've learned more about what God's doing. They participated in some way. And it's just like this continual thing that just keeps growing the more that I do it. So it's really kind of this mindset of, how can I humble myself in such a way that it's not about me, it's about the Lord, and it's about me connecting you with what he's doing. And let's walk that journey together, and let's see where the fit is. And maybe it's fundraising money for an anti-trafficking center. Maybe it's raising money for clean water. Maybe it's taking people to Africa and show them what God's doing there. Maybe it's sending missionaries. I don't know. But whatever it is, God's going to be glorified and the church is going to be better as a result of that. And to me, that's success in my eyes. And it's a weird view of success, but it just feels right for me.
Yeah, you had said, humble. And that's the only thing I was thinking the whole time when you were talking is you were essentially humbled by God, but you were able to see the actual impact that you did have by not pursuing that missionary lifestyle, which is good.
Right. Yeah.
Hey, this is Justin from the Faith 180 crew. Sorry to cut this episode short, but thanks for tuning in today. We're not done yet. We're continuing this conversation with Tanya on our next episode. So until then, stay connected, stay blessed, and catch you next time.
Faith 180 is an independent podcast produced and hosted by Thomas Hazelton and Jordan Hamilton. Producer and editor, Justin Goddard. Theme song, Goodbye Ol' Me, from the album First Things First, used with permission and performed by Consumed by Fire. Available on all streaming platforms. Visit consumedbyfire.com and follow the band on social media, linked in the description of this episode. Follow Faith 180 on Facebook or email us at faith180crew@gmail.com.